are literally shaping the planet.
Purpose is the only pathway to a regenerative future.
We have a choice to stay with the status quo or to change.
What is the point of trying to be just resilient when we can actually innovate?
I'm super excited to be part of this summit. When Shadow reached out a few months ago and mentioned that this year's theme was going to be about innovation and sustainability in the lens of the built environment, I think that really resonated with what we're all about at Local Logic. And so for those of you who don't know who we are and what we're doing, essentially, we're a team of urban planners turned data scientists and are looking to use data and AI to build better cities. We believe in the power of data, and we believe that it really could have an impact in changing the way cities are built to better represent the needs of citizens that live in them. As urban planners, what struck us is that be it urban planning, real estate development, is really kind of at the intersection of a science and an art form. Unlike engineering or even architecture, that's really based on real science, real data, urban planners and developers are kind of get together and figure out what they believe is best for citizens. And we really believe that there's a place for us to introduce more rigor in order for us to reflect on and build cities that are maybe more representative of the real needs that citizens have. And by doing so, we think that there's a chance for us to consider more than just market dynamics or immediate needs, but really reflect on the long-term impact that these types of investments in infrastructure can have on the cities that we're building today. And so at Local Logic, we really think of cities as these complex ecosystems, right? Essentially, today, if you stand outside your house, you kind of intuitively understand what it's like to be there, right? You understand the shops you have access to, how you can get to where you're trying to go. You understand the noise level, the traffic patterns, whether or not you feel safe, right? You're essentially synthesizing thousands of points of data to map out your environment in your head. And then you can compare that specific location with the location of your office or a place you've been on your travels in another country. Essentially, we're using intuition because there's so much information and it's so complex to make sense of what it's like to be in a specific environment, right? And this complexity is what also makes it a perfect problem for AI to solve. Given enough high quality representative data, there's a world in which we'd be able to use data to map out this ecosystem and properly understand what creates that emotion, that sense of place, that intuitive feeling that you have standing outside your house today. And so we believe that with more and more data on cities becoming available, we'll be able to use data to create essentially a digital version of the city. We'll be able to map out this ecosystem and do that at scale across countries or perhaps the world, but then understand with a high level of granularity what it's like to live at a specific address in a specific neighborhood of a specific town. Over the past 2 years, there's a tremendous amount of open data that's been released, right? I think it's municipal governments have more than doubled the access to open data through platforms or through other programs. And so we're really living through this shift where more than ever, it's possible for us to get access to this type of data. What's important or relevant about getting access to more data is that it actually allows us to consider more perspectives, to quantify the impact of more things in cities. So to go back to the analogy of the city as an ecosystem, with more data, what it's going to allow us to do is essentially map out every single characteristic of that ecosystem. So if we're able to understand what's there and why it matters and how it works together, as we change one element in that ecosystem, be it an investment in a new development project or a public investment in some sort of infrastructure improvement, well, then we'll be better at quantifying the impact of that investment on all the other factors that are related, but not directly related to that one change in our ecosystem. What this allows us to do is, like I was saying, is consider these thousands of perspectives that the traditional development or planning process maybe wouldn't allow for, right? We're often stuck in our silo looking at it from our perspective, be it the developer, the municipality, or the transportation agency, without looking at a holistic or gaining a holistic understanding of what the impact of that change will be on the future of cities for all citizens that inhabit it. And so what we see as the future is that data will actually unlock that capability of us understanding with real numbers, with real science backing the decisions or the perspectives that we have. An example that I like to use when I talk about this concept is that of a cycling lane. I think depending on where you live in the country, cycling lanes might be a contentious issue. It certainly is here in Montreal, where Localogic is based. Essentially, what we normally do is when we're thinking of an infrastructure improvement like the adding of a reserved cycling lane, we'll look at it from the point of view of cyclists. And of course, putting in more protected cycling infrastructure is beneficial for that mode of transportation. But it also has repercussions on a tremendous amount of other stakeholders in the built form, right? We know that bringing in a cycling lane will actually impact the commercial offering, the retailers on that street. So it's proven that cyclists are going to stop and shop or stop for a coffee more often than a driver would. It's also going to impact parking spots, perhaps, or maybe the amount of foot traffic on that specific street segment. That can have a repercussion on the type of environment, right? The vibe, the feeling of that space, which could beneficially impact the value of residential real estate next door, or perhaps of the greenery or the use of greenery or parks in that area. And so that one investment in cycling infrastructure actually snowballs and impacts everything else within the ecosystem, including residential real estate. And so the idea, the concept is that we need to understand how all those things are linked through data in order to get that holistic perspective. So I think there's a lot of talk about data specifically in the real estate industry, but what makes up good data? So we kind of have like 4 rules at Localogic, the 4 V's. The first one is volume. We need to have enough data on whatever it is that we're analyzing to answer the questions that we have, right? We need significance, statistical significance. If we have a small data set, it might not be representative of all perspectives and we can't use it. So we need to work towards large volumes of data. Second one is velocity. We need to make sure that for the question that we're asking, we have the appropriate frequency of data capture or data updates for a specific type of information. So the example here would be that, if you go and find real estate transactions for an entire month, every month, well, that might be enough because you don't really care when in the month that was sold, or perhaps you do, but maybe you don't care at what time in the day that house was sold. Whereas if you look at footfall data, so foot traffic data, well, it's really, really relevant to understand when in the day there's a high traffic of pedestrians on a specific street segment. And so in that case, we need a high frequency of data capture. The third V is veracity or quality, right? How representative of reality is that data set? And I think that is kind of the biggest issue when it comes to data and data science is how can we get the most the most high quality data set? And especially when it comes to the built form is how do we know that that data is representative of reality? We can't go out and measure every single setback across the entire world. So what are the sources of data, or how can we build a data pipeline that is of high enough quality and representative of reality? Finally, it's variety, right? So how much of the reality are we representing? And I think in real estate, this is a really interesting topic because for so many years, the emphasis has always been on getting data on the asset, right? You look at CoStar or other large companies, which are essentially going to tell you who are the tenants of that specific asset. Or in residential real estate, what's the square footage of a property, how many bedrooms and bathrooms, what the level of quality of the kitchen, was it renovated, if so when was it built, right? There's a large emphasis put on the asset itself, where we know that the location characteristics in which that asset lives is super representative of, or a huge driver of value, right? Location, location, location. So how can we go and expand our view on the types of data sources that we can get access to that might be a predictive indicator in driving value or driving the feel that space making attribute of a specific location. And there's more and more providers that are out there essentially licensing alternative data, right? Other forms of data that could be an indicator into those models. The other really challenging aspect of real estate data is that there's very few transactions, right? So if you're trying to indicate or predict the real estate market, there's only a certain number of real estate transactions that you can go off of. And every asset is unique and is combined to a unique location. And so it's really, really difficult to assess the real estate market as compared to other assets where there might be millions of transactions every single second, right? A house is sold on average every 7 years, which is a totally different reality. And so hence the importance of that last point of variety, of finding other data sets that might become a leading indicator in order to predict a transaction or predict what it's like to be in a specific location. And so once you have that data, it's of high enough quality, there's enough velocity, and you think it's representative of reality, well, unfortunately, it's not enough. What we need, and where the industry is at today, is we need to transform that data into actionable insights. And so the task is to provide a framework with which, be it a private or public institution, is able to bring that data, extract insights, and integrate that into their development or their decision-making process. Interesting stat is that about 80% of AI projects are actually never used by companies, which means that either they're asking the wrong question or they're just not asking it at the right moment. And so actionable insights is when data is used more intentionally, allowing us to understand true drivers of value, or to understand something that will actually materially change or could materially change the decision we take. And so the first thing we need to make sure is to ask the right questions, right? We need to ask the question that is going to be relevant at the right moment in the process, and then integrate that data science endeavor into the process that we use. It can't be run as a separate process. So another way of integrating that is also asking smaller questions, right? Instead of trying to predict gentrification in your area, start by asking how many off-street parking spaces you should add, or which amenities of the building drive value, or what are consumers looking for today on the market, right? Addressing smaller, more concrete questions, and then building in that process in your workflow to kickstart a cultural change in your organization, where down the line, you're able to leverage it in AI in a more significant way, and maybe make bigger decisions, or it be a bigger part of your process. Ultimately, I believe that there's going to be a shift to much more quantitative approach to the way that we think about development or planning as a profession. In fact, we're seeing a lot of innovative firms already start to ask bigger questions, right? Where should I build in the United States, given a product that I already have? Or I have all these parcels of land, what should I build on them based on what the market is looking for today? How's the city going to evolve over time? What is the investment thesis that we should develop? All these questions that data science can answer are only relevant if they're applicable and they're actionable in today's process within your organization. And so if you're able to include that in the way that you're thinking about the development work or the policy work that you're working on, well, then there's a really, really interesting way of thinking about how quantifying cities would allow us to measure and capture externalities that in today's process we just can't can do. And this idea of value captation. So this is used and popular on the public side. And actually, there's here in Montreal, the provincial government actually used this concept to finance new light rail infrastructure, where essentially what they did is they tried to calculate the appreciation and value in surrounding areas of specific light rail stops and said, well, there's going to be an increase in this much of your land value, and then they taxed that increase in order to finance their project. Now, that's a political decision to do that at a municipal level or a provincial level, but I think that concept is really, really interesting and could be applied on the private sector as well, where essentially you're able to understand demand for specific amenity or specific characteristic of a development project, and then justify an investment into the creation of that amenity by capturing its value in another part of your project. So think of a mixed-use development, right? Where you're maybe able to say, well, I'm investing in an area that feels unsafe, and I know that demand will increase if we're able to create a sense of safety in this neighborhood. Well, what can we do from the project point of view to design something that will contribute to that sense of safety? Maybe it's the creation of ground floor retail that operates at many times during the day so that we can have eyes on the street. Or maybe it's incentivizing people to be using or to be walking around rather than using their car, so there's more life on that street. And suddenly you're actually able to change the vibe, the feeling, the makeup of that built form in order to change the sense of security that somebody would have. And you finance those uses by the residential offering that you have that are now suddenly worth a little bit more. And so if you're able to use data to understand what's in demand, what people want, and then are able to bring that into your financial pro forma and make the case for it from a financial point of view, not only are you building a more innovative project or maybe able to invest in something that would traditionally be more risky, but you're also benefiting all citizens in that neighborhood, not only the people that you're building that specific property for. And so how do you do this? Well, the first thing is you need to identify the factors that impact price, right? What are the drivers of value, both from the property characteristics to the location characteristics? And you need to understand what's there today, what's coming up in the future, but also what's the demand for these specific characteristics, and how is that changing over time, right? And using data to do this is something that's now possible given the amount of data that we have. And then you convert those factors into quantifiable features in your model. And what we mean by quantifiable features is maybe saying, well, it's the number of parking spots off street, or it's the noise level of that area, or it's the access to greenery, or whatever it is. And then by playing around or doing a sensitivity analysis on those different features, you're then able to optimize for your overall asset price or optimize for livability of that specific area. And then you can rerun that process thousands and thousands of times to optimize the right mix of those features and create the most innovative, the most impactful development for a specific property. And then rerun that process for different locations depending on what your investment thesis is. And so that concept, I believe, will have the potential of being a game changer when we think about sustainability. We often are seeing issues come up now around being able to create spaces that are more interesting for citizens, but also being able to capture other things that might not be as easy to recognize or as to quantify, like sustainability. As people are looking to live in ways that are more sustainable, well, we can create those environments, and we can actually understand the financial repercussions of investing in those types of areas of metered V's in order to optimize for it. And thus, not only do it because it's the right thing to do, or because we believe that the market is looking for those types of environments, but because we're able to quantify and understand the risk associated with not doing it, or the value associated with it on the projects that we're developing, on the real estate that we're selling or we're renting out. And so to summarize, we believe that the first thing we need to do is increase the transparency and the access to data across the industry. We're seeing a lot of large companies hoard that data or only focus on a specific type of data. We need to look outside of more traditional real estate data sets and really think about what are ways for which we're able to digitize or map our cities through data. Once we have that access to the data secured, well, we need to figure out a way of understanding why that matters, right? We know what's there, we know what's coming up. Well, how are people responding to that? What's the demand associated with those spaces, and what are the trends and demands, right? How has COVID affected the types of areas and communities we want to live in, and understand that pattern and include it in the process that we're using to drive those decisions to develop innovative communities. And then the concept of value captation, right? Of using that understanding, that quantifiable metric for those different features, those different characteristics, and actually making sense of it from a financial point of view to make sure that we're controlling our risks or optimizing the potential of a site or of an investment thesis. And so financing one with the other in order to make the case that it's worthwhile to do this. And I think the thing that we're most passionate about, that we believe is one of the most important things being in the real estate space, is that we have a responsibility of what we're building. Essentially, we believe that the future of cities will be shaped by data. And we believe that the rigor that data enables us to have is essential, because the developments that we build today are going to be there for the next 100 years, and are going to have crazy repercussions on a ton of different social issues. And if today we're only focused on our bottom line and are not thinking about the impact that we can have as an industry on the built form, well, that's totally irresponsible. And so we need to make the case that it's important to be more rigorous in our approach of quantifying those externalities, of understanding them, and of optimizing our investments for our financial bottom line, but also for the good of all the community that's going to be impacted by that one investment, that one change in the built form. And so it's something that we're super passionate about, and we certainly want to continue the conversations on this topic over the next few years as more and more data and AI is used in the way that we're thinking about building cities. So I have a few minutes left. I don't know if people have questions. More than happy to answer.
Thank you. And I know sometimes it takes people a minute to type a question. Yeah. We can give it a second or two. And if anyone does have questions that kind of come up after this session, please feel free to drop those into the Slack channel. There's definitely some discussions going on there.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out. I have my email here. Again, we're pretty interested by this topic, and if ever you have questions or want to chat about it, more than open to schedule a quick Zoom call with anybody. I'm not seeing anything. Kayla, how about you?
No, I don't see anything either. So yeah, please feel free to reach out to Vincent or in the Slack channel. And then from here, we have a short 15-minute break. So we will be reconvening with our first panel discussion of the day at 5 o'clock. So thank you again, Vincent.
Thanks again. All right.